It all came crashing down over a tax, a seemingly small 3% tax. But in the world of global trade, even the smallest spark can ignite a firestorm. What began as a technical policy decision soon spiraled into a full-blown international crisis, catching both governments and citizens off guard. On June 27, 2025, after months of tense negotiations and mounting frustration, President Trump declared trade talks with Canada dead, blasting Canada's new digital services tax as a direct attack on America. The announcement sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, as leaders scrambled to respond to the sudden escalation. The announcement, made on Truth Social, was dramatic and swift. Tariffs on Canadian goods would hit within a week, rattling an already fragile economic relationship. The news dominated headlines, with markets reacting instantly and businesses on both sides of the border bracing for impact. The tax itself? A 3% levy on revenue from large digital companies, mostly American, earned from Canadian users. For years, these tech giants had operated in Canada, reaping profits with little local taxation. Now, the Canadian government was drawing a line in the sand. Canada saw it as fairness. Tech giants should contribute to the economy they profit from. Supporters argued it was about leveling the playing field for Canadian businesses and ensuring multinational corporations paid their fair share. The move was popular among many Canadians, who felt left behind by the digital economy. For Trump, it was a challenge to American might that demanded retaliation. He framed the tax as an attack on American innovation and jobs, vowing to defend U.S. interests at any cost. The rhetoric quickly grew heated, with both sides digging in. The timing stung. Just weeks earlier, both leaders had promised a new trade deal at the G7, raising hopes for normalcy. There was talk of renewed cooperation and economic recovery after years of uncertainty. But those hopes vanished with a single post, exposing how fragile the relationship had become. Social media erupted with outrage and disbelief, as ordinary people realized the fallout would touch their daily lives. This wasn't about 3%, it was about sovereignty. Canada asserted its right to tax, while the US saw it as a hostile act. The debate quickly shifted from economics to national pride, fueling protests and heated debates in both countries. What should have been routine fiscal policy became an international incident. News outlets around the world covered the standoff, speculating on the global implications and the future of digital taxation. The stage was set for a bitter trade dispute, with rhetoric and tariffs both spiraling upward. Investors grew nervous, and companies began to reconsider cross-border plans. The consequences would reach far beyond the halls of power in Washington and Ottawa. From small business owners to families shopping for groceries, everyone would soon feel the ripple effects of a digital tax that broke the camel's back. The road to this trade breakdown was long, winding, and filled with warning signs that many chose to ignore. Tensions simmered for years, with both sides exchanging sharp words and threats, but few believed it would ever come to this. Trouble began in earnest after Trump's re-election, when he shocked the world by announcing a sweeping 25% tariff on all Canadian and Mexican imports, citing national security and economic fairness. This wasn't a targeted move, it was a direct hit to the foundation of North American trade, disrupting supply chains that had taken decades to build. Businesses on both sides of the border braced for impact, uncertain how deep the damage would go. By March 2025, the tariffs took effect, and Canada hit back with its own retaliatory tariffs, targeting American goods from agricultural products to manufactured machinery. The tit-for-tat cycle began, each side raising tariffs in quick succession, building an economic wall between two deeply connected nations. Diplomacy soured, and trust eroded with every new announcement. In May, Prime Minister Carney made a high-stakes visit to Washington, hoping to find common ground. Instead, he was met with a provocative suggestion that Canada should become the 51st state, an idea Carney flatly rejected, calling it an affront to Canadian independence. The clash was about more than money. It was about sovereignty versus transactional politics, and the right of a nation to chart its own course. The escalation continued. The US slapped 25% tariffs on imported vehicles, threatening thousands of jobs and sending shockwaves through the auto industry. Then, in a move that stunned even seasoned analysts, the US doubled steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%, further straining industries already on edge. Each new measure drove the countries further apart, making a negotiated settlement seem impossible. Talks stalled, and both sides dug in. The relationship, once built on trust and mutual benefit, was now defined by suspicion, frustration, and retaliation. The old rules were gone, replaced by a relentless cycle of economic blows, with each side waiting for the other to blink first. The prospect of peace faded as the trade war deepened, leaving both nations to wonder how, or if, they could ever rebuild what was lost. Why didn't Canada just drop the digital tax? The answer: sovereignty. Prime Minister Carney's government saw U.S. demands as an unacceptable intrusion. The tax became a symbol of autonomy. Giving in would set a dangerous precedent. Ottawa believed caving now would only invite more demands later, threatening everything from environmental rules to labor laws. The government drew a line: negotiate, yes, but not under threat. Canadians, despite economic pain, largely supported this stance. It was about dignity, not just dollars. Canada is not for sale became a rallying cry, reinforcing national identity. Carney's gamble, that the U.S. would feel the pain too, and eventually return to the table. Canada called the bluff, betting on long-term interests over short-term relief. This trade war isn't just politics, it's people's lives. In Canada, unemployment hit 7%, as factories reliant on U.S. parts laid off workers and farmers lost their biggest market. In the U.S., tariffs backfired. Manufacturers paid more for Canadian materials, squeezing profits or raising prices for consumers. Everyday costs, from cars to groceries, climbed higher. Small businesses faced impossible choices: absorb costs and risk closure, or raise prices and lose customers. Multiply that across industries, and the pain is everywhere. The two economies are so intertwined that a blow to one hurts the other. Tariffs meant to protect jobs ended up destroying them on both sides. The cycle of harm was relentless, with workers and families paying the price. The human cost was the real tragedy of this dispute. While Canada faced tariffs, Japan got a handshake. In July 2025, Trump announced a new trade deal with Japan: 15% tariffs on Japanese cars, compared to 25% for Canadian and Mexican vehicles. The 10-point gap gave Japan a huge edge in the U.S. auto market. The deal included a $550 billion Japanese investment in the U.S., a PR win for Trump. Canada, despite being a top trading partner, was sidelined. The message transactional wins mattered more than long-standing alliances. Industry leaders were baffled. Why reward a competitor and punish a neighbor? The logic was political, not economic. The result? North American manufacturing was disadvantaged while Japan gained ground. The consequences would ripple through the continent's industries for years. Nowhere was the fallout clearer than in the auto industry. North America's car market relied on seamless cross-border supply chains. The new tariffs shattered that system, making Japanese cars cheaper than those from Canada or Mexico. American auto leaders called it a disaster, punishing partners, rewarding competitors. Consumers flocked to cheaper Japanese models, squeezing North American automakers. Jobs in Michigan, Ohio, and Ontario were suddenly at risk. The policy, meant to protect U.S. industry, threatened its very foundation. It was a textbook case of trade policy backfiring. Trump's trade strategy was pure high-stakes poker: maximum chaos, maximum leverage. Extreme demands, public threats, and sudden reversals kept Canada off balance. The digital tax dispute became a loyalty test, not just a policy disagreement. Negotiations played out in the media, not behind closed doors. Experts saw it as shock therapy, threatened to blow up the deal, hoping the other side blinks. The message to other countries: look what we did to Canada, you could be next. But this approach eroded trust, turning a partnership into an adversarial standoff. Canada's refusal to fold showed the limits of this strategy. Push too hard, and even your closest ally might walk away. The result: a broken relationship and no deal at all. Beyond economics, a legal storm brewed over the tariffs. Trump invoked national security laws to justify them, but many legal experts called this a stretch. Courts weighed in. Some ruled the tariffs illegal, questioning if Canada was really a threat. Appeals kept the tariffs in place, leaving businesses in limbo. The legal uncertainty made planning impossible for companies on both sides. The court battles became a test of presidential power versus Congress's authority over trade. The outcome could reshape how future presidents wield trade powers. For now, the legal chaos only deepened the crisis. By late summer 2025, the US and Canada found themselves at a crossroads, forced to make a pivotal decision. Would they escalate the conflict, or return to the negotiating table? Tensions had been simmering for months, and now, the stakes had never been higher. President Trump issued a stark ultimatum, threatening to raise tariffs on Canadian goods to a punishing 35% if a new deal wasn't reached by August. The message was clear, the clock was ticking, and the pressure was mounting on both sides. For Canada, the threat was more than just numbers on a page. It meant shuttered factories, lost jobs, and communities facing an uncertain future. The prospect of even harsher retaliation loomed, promising deeper economic pain for ordinary Canadians. Escalation would ripple across North America, leading to more layoffs, rising prices at the grocery store, and families struggling to make ends meet. The economic fallout would not respect borders. It would hit workers and consumers on both sides. The alternative was to step back from the brink, return to the table, and seek a compromise that could benefit both nations. Negotiation offered a path to stability, but it would demand real effort and a willingness to listen. Achieving a deal would require patience, mutual respect, and a recognition that Canada was not an adversary, but a vital partner. Only by working together could they hope to resolve the crisis. The negotiations would be tough, with hard choices and tense moments. But for both countries, it was the only realistic way out of a spiraling trade war. The stakes were unmistakable. Millions of workers, families, and small businesses on both sides of the border depended on a stable, predictable relationship. Their livelihoods hung in the balance. In the end, the White House held the cards. The world watched to see if it would double down on confrontation or choose the path of reason and diplomacy. The decision would not just affect politicians, it would shape the future of North American trade, impacting economies, jobs, and daily life for years to come. Across both nations, millions waited anxiously, hoping that common sense and cooperation would ultimately prevail.